Hello, and welcome to eQuoteMD. I'm Tim Ryan, and I'm here to answer your medical malpractice insurance questions. Recently, I was asked whether or not a client of mine should choose a claims-made policy or an occurrence policy. Now, this is a bit of a loaded question, but it's a very good one, a very important one. And I'd like to share a couple of ideas with you today as to how to decide between an occurrence and a claims-made policy. Now, I will say first that occurrence policies are usually more prevalent along the northeast coast, and most of the rest of the country has by this time switched to claims-made policies. In other words, if you live in Missouri, it might be difficult to actually get an occurrence policy. If you live in New York, it'll be very easy. Secondly, it's important to understand that every medical practice is different, and there's not a cookie-cutter answer as to which policy is better, because an occurrence policy may be better for one specific doctor, and a claims-made policy may be better for another doctor. And it's important to look at every medical practice as an individual situation to be able to select the best type of policy. Thirdly, and before we jump into the rest of the video, it's important just to understand that there's a lot more factors while selecting a claims-made or an occurrence policy that I could possibly talk about in one short video blog, but I do want to give you just a couple of the main points that I look for. First, it's important to remember that an insurance company looks at you as the doctor as basically a risk. How much money is it going to cost to cover this doctor and make sure that this doctor and all the other doctors are being protected adequately? That cost boils down to a specific dollar amount. So, if you're an anesthesiologist in New York, it costs a certain amount of money to insure you and insure all the other anesthesiologists in New York, who are covered under this insurance company. Now, that dollar amount needs to come from the doctor and be transferred to the medical malpractice insurance company. I say all of this just to stress the fact that whether or not you pick an occurrence policy or a claims-made policy, the insurance company does need to make a certain amount of income in order to stay viable. So, as you know, with the claims-made policy, it starts out much cheaper than the occurrence policy. It grows over time, and after about the first 4 or 5 years, it'll become equal or around the same as your occurrence policy as far as the premium. And then eventually, all that money that you saved in the beginning has to go into purchasing a tail, which generally is going to be 150 to 200% of your final year's premium. In other words, with the claims-made policy, you save a bunch of money up front, but potentially you have to pay it all on the back end. The occurrence policy stays level for most of the time that you're practicing. You don't save a lot of money up front, but you also don't spend a lot of money on the backside with the tail. So, in other words, I'm essentially trying to say that the amount of money that you are going to outlay for your medical malpractice insurance is going to be roughly the same whether or not you choose an occurrence or claims-made policy. However, there are exceptions to that rule, like there are with most rules in the medical malpractice insurance world. There are times where you can earn a free tail, and that free tail is going to mean that that claims-made policy is going to be cheaper than the occurrence policy. Generally, you earn a free tail after being with the same insurance company 5 years prior to retirement. If one of my clients is looking like they're going to retire in the near future and are still debating whether or not it is good to take the occurrence or the claims-made policy, it is important to understand that if they can qualify for a free tail, they're going to save a lot of money through the significant discounts in the first 4 or 5 years with the claims-made policy, and then save even more money when they don't have to buy the tail at the end of it. It's also important to remember that a claims-made policy transfers its liability from company to company every year at the new policy. In other words, if you have a claims-made policy and you transfer it to a new insurance company at the end of your policy year, all the liability and all the exposure all the way back to your retroactive date are now the responsibility of the new insurance company. With an occurrence policy, if you purchase an occurrence policy for 1 year, no matter how many years in the future you are after you've bought that policy, the liability stays with that specific company, even though you may have jumped from company to company in the subsequent years. In other words, it's important to understand that the claims-made policy is transferable every year and that you can go ahead and pick a new, financially strong company if you so choose. The benefit to the Occurrence policy is just the fact that it's very simple. You need coverage in force when an occurrence happens that causes a claim. You're not going to save a lot of money up front by purchasing an Occurrence policy, but you also don't have to worry about purchasing a tail. And this is very important for a lot of doctors because you purchase the tail generally when you've retired. In other words, when your income stops from doing your medical practice, you now have to put out a very large sum of money that generally equals 150 to 250% of your final year's medical malpractice insurance premium if you had the claims-made policy. So, many doctors choose the Occurrence policy because they avoid the headache, they avoid the complication of a claims-made policy, and they avoid having to pay out a tail when they are no longer earning an income from that specific medical practice. Again, one is not better than the other. They all have their own applications and their own specific situations where they work better than the other policy. Again, it is important to look at each individual medical practice and make a knowledgeable decision as to which policy is going to be better for you in the long term. Again, I'm Tim Ryan, here to answer your medical malpractice insurance questions. Have a great day.